Guys, Sleepy Reader here, Damien. I'm going to go a little crazy on you. I'm going to try to give you my thoughts on all of these comics. Hopefully, I will not take too long on any individual one. Um, Ideally, I would give you comic book thoughts every week, and I haven't been, so I just kind of grabbed all I could find that I'd read recently to talk that I wanted to say something about. I have been trying to be consistent on the Batman stuff, so if you want to hear my Batman thoughts, those are in other longer or slightly more in-depth videos on individual issues. Starting with I Hate Fairyland, which I had very mixed feelings about because I I really enjoy the art. It's some kind of sweet spot of pseudo childlike, pseudo cartoon art, kind of a Mad Magazine meets fairy tales feel to it is pretty strong. Um, Amazing colors, everything like that. But it's extremely one note. Basically, we arrive in fairyland and violence commences, and then violence continues, and it's just violence, violence, violence. Everything has bones and blood and guts inside of it, no matter what animated like object it is. Um, I don't see any anywhere where it could be going other than just we'll do more violence, we'll beat up more things, and it's a shame because I kind of thought it was a cool premise of, you know, a young girl ends up in fairyland, her dream comes true, and then over time it sours on her and she becomes this violent sociopath. But the thing is, that's all we get is the violent sociopath. And her arrival in Fairyland begins as a violent, horrific experience where she's just all smashed up and beat up from landing there, and no one cares, and she's off on her way to try to find her way home, which she obviously doesn't find her way home, and it's just violence, violence, violence. I could have imagined all kinds of, you know, things that could have been said about fairy tales and about all of that. Um, this would have made, in the kind of Mad Magazine vein, this would have made a hilarious 5 to 10 page comic strip. I can't see where it's going or what there could be for multiple issues. Um, I feel like Scotty Young's done a lot better job in his Baby Marvel comic books that he did, like A versus X and that series that he's done. Um, Maybe because he's more directly goofing off of the Marvel characters and he's not satirizing specific fairyland things here. It's just a general idea of a fairyland. Um, Maybe they will go on to satirize specific things, Alice in Wonderland or, what have you, Wizard of Oz. There's certainly a Wizard of Oz vibe going on there, but it's not really satirized at this point. Okay, Starfire. This this series is beginning to click more for me. I mean, I've been enjoying reading it with my daughter. This issue had some violence in it that disturbed her. She's very easily disturbed by violence. So I didn't finish the issue with her. I might come back to it, but I was enjoying it enough that I snuck off and read it by myself when she wasn't looking. It has a nice sense of humor. Ironically, for the violence and that there's lots of drinking, the logic of it, of the plot and the character interactions really is very childlike. Um, Perhaps echoing the childlikeness of Starfire, but it feels like it doesn't bear up to too much adult scrutiny. But it's fun, and the little pieces that they're weaving together are becoming more interesting as the issues go forward and the characters are we spend more time with the characters. Dark Corridor, this is, I think, on its third issue now, and if you saw my haul video on Wednesday, I picked up this out of the cheap bins. I was curious about it. I've heard I think Ghost Critic likes it a lot. I think Comic Crack was a bit disappointed with it. I'm a bit puzzled by it, but it's kind of fascinating. I don't think I want to pay $4 an issue for it. It's got this art that is very indie. It feels like the kind of indie that's influenced by maybe Dick Tracy comics and maybe a little bit of European comics and other kind of cruder newspaper comic strip kind of drawings. And it has interestingly intertwined groups of characters. For some reason, I think we're in Florida, but I don't know why I'm thinking that. I guess because of the palm trees and stuff. We're in a town called Red Circle, I think, or I can't remember. So I think this will be something that either if I continue to find the issues at a strong discount, or maybe I will pick up a trade, because it's fun. It's strangely light for being dark, if you see what I'm saying, all about gangsters and people getting killed. But there's kind of a light, again, a childlike air to it, maybe, that surprised me and puzzled me. So I'm not really sure what to make of it. I can see why somebody might really like it. I can see why somebody might be disappointed with it. So it's interesting enough for me to pick it up when I can. Okay, I perhaps, well, it's only 4 issues. I perhaps foolishly, after really liking issue 1 of this, put it on my pull. Because after reading this issue, I might have said, well, I'll just cut it off and not, because it's a $4 book, and not spend so much money on it. Because the first issue really felt, even though it was about these people have been fighting through time, through reincarnation, it had a kind of original feel to it. And this time it got kind of overwhelmed by its attempts in all the caption boxes to give us the internal feeling of what the character is going through, but it felt more like the writer was just poking around trying to find the right thing without being sure what it was. There are cool elements, but it just seems like more of a mess. There's a little girl who's the person's reincarnated father and stuff like that is fun. The art is extremely good, and there's some pretty amazing action scenes of the little girl sort of in these ghost images. I guess we see past selves of her, which give her the ability to jump over cars and fight during a car race. It's very, it's a little bit Matrix feeling, the kind of over-the-top action, I guess. So yeah, it's like the writer is not quite confident enough or hasn't figured things out off the page and just put on the page what we really need to know, and just kind of vomiting out too much. But I made my shop go to the trouble of putting it on the pull list, and I know that when I take things off the pull list, they take a loss on the next issue that comes, I think. So it's only 4 issues. I'll just keep getting it, and maybe it'll fulfill the promise of the first issue in the 3rd and 4th issue. Omega Men number 5. After I got so excited about the Omega Men and was thinking they might be like the next equivalent of Vias for Vendetta, this issue was it had a lot of good stuff in it, and it had this interesting take on a big religious organization, and we found out that our character Brute was the son, basically, of the Pope of this religion. But it also somehow it felt like the progress of the book got stopped a little, and I'm not sure why. But I'm not totally ready to say this is going to be a masterpiece after reading this issue. Now, there was a bad issue. Really liked the return of the main artist and everything. It's still a comic book that I highly recommend if you can get all the issues, because you definitely need to read them all in order. They build on top of each other. It would hardly make any sense by itself. Or I assume there's a trade coming up after issue 6. I highly recommend it still. Plutona continued my feeling like in the first issue that this was too much for me, like a Hollywood movie. And in this issue it felt, it's not that I hated it or anything, but this issue felt like it was really stretching. Like what the whole issue took up what I felt could have, or most of the whole issue took up what I felt could have been about 4 or 5 pages. There was a cool scene at the end, kind of my favorite part of it, showing what each kid was doing that night, and sort of we get to compare their lives, which was very interesting, and took advantage of something that comics can do in a way that would be awkward in a movie or a TV show, to flash back and forth between characters. But to flash back and forth between characters in every panel is no big deal in a comic, and works really well. So in that sense, that's kind of promising. It's certainly not a bad story. Just, expectations, I guess, originally, especially because I like the look of the covers so much. But again, another 4-issue series. This one only $2.99, and yeah, if you compare it to Welcome Back, it's a much more confidently written book. So I'm not at all unhappy that I'm going to be getting all 4 issues. Just not telling anyone else to run out there and get it if you aren't already getting it. Here to me is the Kaiju Max. So I probably read this a number of weeks ago, but I just don't think I've mentioned it in a comic book thoughts kind of video. So I want to emphasize this is a very unique comic book out there that probably most people don't run into that often. Was this issue 6? This was issue 6, and it is the end of the arc, the end of season 1. It even says end season 1 there, and I think season 2 is not coming back till sometime next year. Where did they say that? Anyway, I think most of you have probably heard me talk about this before, and it just continues with the kaijus, the giant monsters on their prison island, and the life of the guards and of the kaijus. But the twists and turns in each issue are so good, and everything is so satisfying. At first, you view the art as art from a children's comic, but you stop even noticing that, because this is very adult and very sophisticated about monsters and a prison thing. So if that kind of twisted look at a prison for monsters appeals to you, this really hits the mark. And so I highly recommend getting the trade, which should be out next month, I assume, or in the month follow. And I think I saw that the trade is only going to be $9.99. So compared to getting all these 6 issues for $4 a piece, that's a great deal. This is one I don't feel bad at. This is something special to me, so it doesn't bother me at all to pay the premium price. If you saw my pull video 2 weeks ago, before I pulled that video off, I mentioned accidentally buying Baboushka because I thought it was a $2.99 image book, and I like to try all of those. It's a $3.99 image book, so I knew that even if I liked it, I was going to wait for trade on it. I think this was, we already have Velvet. This is a woman spy kind of book. It has a different twist than Velvet. Baboushka is a Russian, like a Russian mafia queen who then fled Russia and is being forced by the U.S. government to be a spy. She's kind of unrealistically super good at what she does. I mean, to an extreme extent. But if it were a $2.99 book and it had better art, I could see picking it up regularly. The art really bothered me. It felt very sort of hastily done, computer photoshopped kind of stuff. It just didn't have a style particularly. Felt like cells from an animated movie without much style to it. I didn't like the colors. So yeah, the art was just a big turnoff for me. Depending on my mood, and maybe if I hear other good reviews of this, I could see buying a cheap trade, but not very excited about Baboushka, even though the plot and the writing are pretty good. Okay, another one that I'm not sure what to think of. So 8 House Number 4 is the beginning of something called Yurus. Yurus is a girl on a planet. She's like a princess, and there's some kind of weird social thing going on. I'm not going to try to explain it here. It was pretty good. At this point, I feel a little impatient because I have any idea how Yurus connects to Kaim, connects to Arclight. There's no sense of any reason that these are connected at all. Although they're all obviously friends or people Brandon Graham admires. This one has a pretty interesting art style. It's definitely got a heavy metal vibe to it, I would say. And it seems like the beginning of an interesting story, but how many issues of this are we going to get? And how long is it going to take to get those issues? And it's going to be hard to follow this. I need the next issue right away and the next issue after that, I think. I mean, it feels like a little bit of a long story so far. So it's a decent science fiction comic, but it's sort of just the way this whole thing is packaged is beginning to annoy me. While I'm being a little grumpy, I totally love the first 3 issues of Space Riders, and this issue felt kind of flat. It's hard to put your finger on why. There's a big confrontation with the person Hammerhead who poked out our hero's eye in the first issue, so it brings things around there. It feels, even though these are all these issues are very simple, with this very simple art, it feels like a simpler, less layered issue than the previous ones. Not bad. I certainly don't feel bad for having picked up these 4 issues, and they pretty strongly hint there's more to come. And I know that at least in on a small press level, this has sold quite well and gone into many printings, the previous issues, so I'm assuming there will be more. And I'll probably pick it up. But it was, of the 4 issues series, the last issue was not the standout. And that's always a little bit of a problem when you end on a slightly lower note. Not a bad note, but a slightly lower note than previous issues. On a much higher note, Nameless issue 5, was this 5 or 6? Nameless number 5 was really awesome and was a really great sort of supernatural Hellblazer-ish story. Really, not for someone weak of stomach, but really awesome art by Chris Burnham, and quite good writing from Grant Morrison. Still waiting to see how all this hooks up and what is real and what's not, and I'm not sure if Morrison will let us know or not. Amazing coloring too. Who's the colorist? Nathan Fairburn is the colorist. I think I'm noticing him more and more, Nathan Fairburn, on coloring books that I really like. So I'm worried that maybe issue 6 is the last issue of this. I hope not, because I feel like there's a lot more to explore here, or I just want the pleasure of it drawn out. I guess this must be from several weeks back, because I remember Ghost Critic picking it as his favorite book for September. We stand on guard after a really uncomfortable issue 3. This is issue 4, and I think this is supposed to only be 6 issues, which is, again, puzzling. Really, the main thing that I feel like we get added here is an extra layer of how evil the Americans are. That not only have they conquered Canada and have prison camps and mercilessly hunt down anybody who wants to be a separatist from the U.S., but they're blaming other things on terrorists and killing off the terrorists rather than have them have any chance to have a trial or anything like that, and have any, so we can just say X, Y, and Z was the fault of these terrorists we just killed, and not have it discussed in public. Does you know, and probably this is what Brian K. Vaughan wants, it made me stop and think for a minute. Back when we finally caught up with Osama bin Laden and killed him, was that an order from the high levels of our government? Make sure you kill him so that there's no public trial where he can talk, or where it can be where there's the option for people to research and try to figure out what he really did versus other things. Kill him off, and then he can be our scapegoat for all evil. I don't know, but that thought passed through my head. I really am not a deep enough thinker on politics to have any confidence on a view on anything like that. I also picked up this back issue of Weirdworld, and I read it, even though it's issue number 2, and I haven't read issue number 1. I probably will eventually read that. I don't know. You know, the art on this guy's art on Electra was really fantastic. Here, some of the pages wow me, and some of them seem very ugly, and there's a lot of photoshopped looking things that aren't entirely effective for me. I don't hate it, but I guess I was expecting to love it more than I did. I kept noticing all these Photoshop blurs on characters all the time, which I don't know why. I don't know why Photoshop bothers me, because certainly really great things are done on Photoshop, but certain things, if I notice them, I just don't enjoy the art as much. I'm not sure what that is in my head that makes me that way. I also read Doctor Strange this week. I think I got my expectations up too high, even though I'd heard it was a little bit disappointing. I think what bothered me most was actually the art. There were some really great scenes, but a lot of confusing layouts that weren't like really cool layouts that were confusing at first, but then really gave you the story in a better way because it's magic and spacey and trippy. They just seemed a little confusing to me. And I would have thought this whole thing was put together in Photoshop. There's the Photoshop thing again. This time, because it all looks like one image layered on top of another, quite literally, you see the edges of the layers. So that, like if you're looking at this thing, you actually feel like pieces of paper were almost collaged on top of each other. Like Doctor Strange was done in one drawing, then layered on top of this monster, and then this black and white drawing of a crowd looking the other way is another layer, and then the lettering's another layer. And I just constantly felt like I was looking at layers, and I wasn't feeling at all part of an organic story. But I don't even know if I'm right about that, because looking at the credits, where are the credits? As always, credits are not where you think they're going to be. They're like 6 pages in. It says Chris Bacello, pencils and colors. And then he has 2 inkers. So that means he did the pencils, someone came along and inked it. Then they put it into Photoshop and he did the colors. But it feels like he just did it all in Photoshop. It's possible he had lots of separate drawings and then he collaged them together himself in Photoshop while he was coloring them. Still, there's some pretty spectacular parts. I don't feel yet like I've got like that. Jason Aaron has this great feel for the character of Doctor Strange, the way he did for Thor, and then the way he did for the female Thor. But I'm willing to give him more time, and the fact is, because I got a print subscription to this via Marvel, I will be getting the first 12 issues, if there are 12 issues. If not, they then transfer you on to something else they think is similar, which is also a little strange. Oh, you know what? I haven't read the Graham Nolan, the short Graham Nolan comic in the back. I like this art much more, very traditional art. It feels like with something like Doctor Strange, while you want all kinds of weirdness, you also want, visually, you want a rootedness too. You need a real world to come back to every now and then. But the real world is done in such a interesting artistic way. I mean, it looks cool. I thought I was going to really like it till I actually read it. But didn't hate it, and feels like there's room for more. It's kind of ironic that this was an extra sized issue. Luckily, good thing about my subscription is I already prepaid for $2.25 or $2.15 per issue, whatever the cost actually is according to the cover. And then a week or two ago, one of my big surprises, one of my favorite books actually, was Saints. I got some tweets on Twitter from the creator, or one of the creators of it, trying to hype it up to me because I guess they knew I had a video station. So that actually made me kind of feel anti-Saints, and I thought maybe I shouldn't pick this up. But I thought it was a really clever supernatural story. The pacing of the storytelling was really good. The line art was really good. The dialogue was really good. The characters are kind of outrageous and interesting. Right off the bat, we get behind the scenes with this rock scene where one member of the band is peeing in a cup and the other one drinks it. But it's pulled off really well. But look at that coloring. And you're looking at it digitally, so to speak, through a camera, through a glass with lots of light coming through. It is such dark, murky coloring. Unfortunately, the coloring was done by the artist himself, but it feels almost like there was a printing mistake, or the artist just had some concept that just did not make it onto the page, so that his quite good and uniquely styled line art is kind of destroyed by the coloring. But I like this enough to sort of work my way through it. I'm kind of fantasizing that this was some kind of printing error and that they'll have that fixed by next issue, so we can see the art a little better. But I guess all these characters are equivalents or like reincarnations of saints of the past. So this guy with the bow and arrow is Saint Sebastian, who was killed by hundreds of arrows sticking in him. If they've said who the other saints are, I haven't picked up on it yet. The Saint Sebastian thing was very obvious. And whenever he opens his shirt, pop, arrows just pop out. And he's an archer. So really kind of fun to get a new comic that feels different from the others. It's not like, I mean, there probably are some horror comics that it's like, but it's not like anything else I'm reading right now. And it's done in a different style and everything like that, so that's really nice. And it's a $2.99 book. So hopefully the bad coloring has not killed their sales on the first issue. I know a lot of people picked it up and then put it down. Hopefully they'll keep going, because I really want to see where the story's going. Okay, how long did it take? It took me 28 minutes to talk about all those books. Oh, well, I guess that's not surprising. For me, that's quick to talk about so many books. I guess I'll probably see you next on Wednesday.